It's Mountain Monday, and you know what to do. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out. Yeah, we're going to need a big breath this Mountain Monday because this is a topic that I determined was so nuclear, it was going to need a couple of segments to really unpack. And no, I'm not just going to talk about the same things for multiple segments. I want to address different elements of the latest Twitter slap fight that is making everyone go crazy. And I'm referring, of course, to developer The Chinese Room accusing CD Projekt Red, the maker of the games, the Witcher games, and the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077, of making sexist games. And the first thing I want to examine is why everyone freaks out when an allegation like this is made. If a developer is accused of clunky gameplay, everyone, treats that like fair criticism. When a developer is mocked for releasing a game that's really buggy, the response is different depending on the developer. If the developer is Ubisoft, they become the temporary laughingstock of the internet. If the developer is Bethesda, everyone just goes, well, it's a Bethesda game. What do you expect? Of course, it's going to be buggy. But there's something about both accusations of isms, sexism, racism, things like that, homophobia, etc., as well as a very rabid fan base for CD Projekt that has made this particular, like I said, Twitter slap fight especially explosive. And I want to look at the first part. Why does everybody freak out when something is accused of sexism? And this is something, this is a, at the core of it, I think, is a difference in language and a difference in life circumstance and a difference in personal comfort with certain words. And it's the difference between people who have been educated in interdisciplinary humanities programs and people who aren't. For people who have gone through, the blank studies courses, so East Asian studies, women's studies, African studies, whatever, things like racism and sexism, they are encountered and used so often, the sting has been somewhat taken out of them. And so people spend 4 to God knows how many years in this system where, to quote a certain someone, everything is racist, everything is sexist. And then they come out, into the rest of the world, and they throw these terms around the way they're thrown around in class and don't understand why everyone else is going, why would you say that? And then, of course, there's everybody else who basically been taught the very simple, don't be racist, don't be sexist, don't be homophobic, don't be transphobic. These are all bad things. They make you a bad person because the implication for most people is if you make a sexist comment or you make a racist comment, it is somehow deliberate and you have hate in your heart. And so this is where a lot of the disconnect is happening. And that's why people have a real disdain for these, what people call social justice warriors. I call outrage warriors. Every so often I use social justice warrior, SJW, as a joke for those people out there kind of, you call people social justice warriors too. Yes, I have, as a joke. I'm open about that. But sometimes SJW just fits in the tweet as opposed to outrage warrior. That shortens to ow, and no one would know what I'm talking about. But people dislike outrage warriors because these are people who are privileged enough for one reason or another to have gone through a university education that is not geared towards wanting a specific job. People don't go into these sorts of interdisciplinary fields wanting to become engineers or doctors or lawyers. They're there for various reasons, but they are spending a lot of money doing the very thing that caused me to back away from this field of study. Is when I started asking around, what kind of jobs can you get with these degrees? It was things like technical writing. Unless you went on and got a PhD or wanted to teach. And of course, tenure positions are very hard to come by. A lot of the interdisciplinary programs are taught by assistant professors. There is no tenure track for a lot of people. And a lot of colleagues of mine who are in academia are stuck at the associate prof level without, opportunity for tenure. They'd have to pack up and move somewhere and start all over again to even get on a tenure track, hoping that tenure track isn't eliminated by the time they get enough publishing to warrant it. And this leads to almost a class warfare. The people who have what others perceive to be the luxury, or I will call it privilege, to take these courses, and other people who are like, I can only afford things that will allow me to get a job. These courses are useless to me. And so must be nice to be able to, muck around for 4 years and come up with a piece of paper for calling things racist and sexist. That is the perception of things like women's studies in the outside world. And it's unfortunate. And it's a failure on the people that claim to speak for these, the stuff I sort of do, which is analysis of social systems, because that's what gender is. It's a social system. And that's why I've been, when I'm out in Ottawa and I'm out at EGLX this weekend and stuff like that, I'm trying to get people to think of these things as systems instead of narrative or image or something like that. I'm much more a fan of gender performance theory than gaze theory or anything like that. I think gaze theory is really outdated. And I will get into that kind of thing more in the Gamer's Guide to Feminism when we hit third wave, the discussion of the third wave. But this is an issue in talking about these things. I've had discussions with people who basically think Twitter is not the place to have these discussions. And that's made me sort of more aware of talking about, of what vehicle I talk about these things in. I admit I'm a little concerned if I pull back discussing these things on Twitter completely, people are going to accuse me of being dishonest or two-faced, because people love to do that on the internet. So I'm not going to pull back from it completely, but you guys have probably noticed more and more I've been saying, like, this is not the place to have this discussion, because there are too many operatives. Because you guys have to remember, there's a lot of well-meaning people on the internet and on Twitter, but there are also a small minority, but a very vocal minority, who are political operatives and trolls. And they love to fling words around to cause a reaction. And it's these political operatives with a certain agenda that have weaponized the examination of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, Eurocentrism, post-colonialism, all these phenomena in the media. And it's the unfortunate thing is it's an important thing to talk about. This is important critical thought, because it does challenge what is considered quote unquote normal, or what is considered best practices. And this is very important, because most of us believe in at least the concept of a meritocracy. We want things to be fair, and that means we want things to be culturally neutral. We don't want someone unfairly penalized because culturally they have a different approach to something. And this is outside of whether something is objectively right or wrong, or in violation of human rights. This is more about different cultures approaching the same topic and the same ideas with different tones. And I get into this a lot because of the neighborhood I was raised in. And I personally think that, community is more powerful than family in a lot of ways in informing how you approach things. Because my environment, my community environment, was very loud. It was a lot of patois. I had lunch with a friend last week, and we were laughing about the whole kiss your teeth thing, because that's a very specific cultural thing that most white people don't do. And there was this like beat, beat, beat. And then we were both like, and we started laughing because it's just this thing you absorb in neighborhoods that are, in my case, they were Afro-Caribbean. And it's one of those things you can't help. But in certain workplaces, that is considered unprofessional. But then you see these exact same workplaces sort of emulated and glamorized on TV, and this aggressive white male, for lack of a better term, dynamic is considered, oh, that's just bumping elbows in the workplace. So there are imbalances in terms of what is considered acceptable cultural practice within workplaces. And the problem is, the minute you sort of point out, well, that's disadvantaging people who don't come from that tradition because it's not normalized for them. They have to either learn to do it or be sort of pushed to the sidelines because that's not their culture. And for people who are not part of that culture, and I'm talking about shows like, Suits and Billions and these high-powered, corporate lawyer shows or DA's office shows, a lot of lawyer shows that use terms like, two guys saying to the other, oh, this is getting you all wet. This is getting you all, oh, you wear a dress today, or what are your panties in a twist? These are all insults. These are guys trying to get in each other's heads by implying that they have female genitalia or wearing female underwear, essentially, or female clothing. Now, are these sexist statements? Yes, they are. Should they be taken out of these shows? Not necessarily. They have to be used deliberately. The writer putting that line in and the actor saying that line needs to be conscious that this is a sexist statement. Now, does this mean the writer is sexist? Does this mean the actor is sexist? No. It means they're deliberately putting these things in because they are giving a nod to the fact that these cultures are at times ridiculously and stereotypically masculine. And that's okay to put in art as long as you're doing it deliberately. And this brings us back to this idea of, one developer accusing another developer of making sexist games. Well, it is a legitimate artistic choice to deliberately have elements of a game that are sexist. I mean, we go back to that whole Arkham City debate with Catwoman and the bad guys calling her a bitch and making comments like that. And, some people saying, I don't want to hear that when I'm playing a video game, and other people saying, but they're the bad guys. Why aren't we even allowed to make the bad guys sexist? And, in terms of personal choice, if people don't want to play that game because they don't want to encounter that content, I think they should know that content's there before they play the game so they can make an informed choice. But I think it is also totally fair for a developer to make bad people do bad things. And some of that is racism and some of that is sexism, but there's better ways to do it than others. And I'm not going to get into my opinion of CD Projekt Red's work in that regard today. That's not a place for Mountain Monday. I want to examine why everyone freaks out when developers have a disagreement like this. Like, my attitude when I saw the Chinese Room blanket statement that all of CD Projekt's catalog is sexist. I'm like, they probably haven't played The Witcher 3. I think it's unfair. And they did say, if that image is anything to go by, that the game is just as sexist. I'm not sure about that either. But the point is, it doesn't matter what I think. People are entitled to their opinion. And all these conspiracy theories popped up about how the Chinese room just wanted PR. I don't necessarily think that's so. I think whoever's on that Twitter account just had a reaction. I think that CD Projekt knows exactly what it's doing when they put a woman in a corset with like spider arms in an image. It's certainly provocative, and it is opening them up to certain accusations of sexism by some people. I mean, this is undeniable. There are consequences to putting certain images out there as marketing. But because of this, because CD Projekt released an image intended to provoke a reaction, and then the Chinese room responded with something intended to provoke a reaction, my inclination is to not give them that reaction, either of them, because both of them, I think, want to get certain, I'm going to invoke that term again, they're trying to get certain panties in a twist, because marketing games is hard now, and any PR is good PR. That's something I think a lot more game companies should take CD Projekt's lead on. I think that, yes, there are controversial elements of their games. They go there, but it hasn't hurt their sales. If anything, the combination of their graphics capabilities, the huge scope of their games, and the distinct, how do I say this? The distinct personality of their brand. It is a very defined, this is what we do. This is what we make. Their monster designs are also fabulous. I think that's something that gets undervalued a lot because most people are focusing on the human-looking women. But their monster designs are amazing. But, you know, they do what they do. And they're not ashamed to do what they do. And I think that's great. Now, is anyone immune to criticism? A lot of people would say no. But then they have a very strong reaction to any criticism of CD Projekt's work, and the sexual content in CD Projekt Red games. And this is where I start thinking there might be something deeper underlying it. And it is that fear we all sort of have, that, you know, white male guilt, for lack of a better term, that there has been so much talk of white male privilege that I think it's created an insecurity in a lot of people that doesn't allow them to discuss these topics without having an exceptionally strong emotional reaction. And I think it's very important to recognize that concern, that discomfort is real. And the only way we're going to have mature discussions about these things is we recognize that people don't want to be sexist, and some people may be afraid that they are. And I've had a lot of people talk to me privately about this issue, saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to be. I don't know what's okay to look at. I don't know what's not okay to look at. I don't know what's a non-demonized form of sexuality that I'm allowed to partake in. Well, the answer there is no non-demonized form of sexuality. We live in a Puritan influenced culture where somebody somewhere is going to think any sex act that is visible to the public is somehow bad and corrupting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the tricky thing here, is there's going to be an element of guilt in any discussion of this. And, you know, I admit I'm really tired of having isms flung at me, that I have internalized misogyny, that I'm racist if I make a joke, that I'm transphobic if I make a joke. And, some of them sting. And I think the well-meaning progressives that are concerned about these things, and I include myself in that category, but and I'm very careful when I have these discussions, and then people accuse me of being too nice, but I'm very careful in these discussions to not ascribe intent unless I'm pretty certain, preponderance of evidence implies that this is, there is intent behind this. Deliberately releasing an image, for example, as a advanced promo for a game is a deliberate act. These things are calibrated. They don't just happen. An offhanded comment at a panel or a casual tweet, on the other hand, we cannot assume the same amount of intent. And so we all have to be very careful at laying accusations of ill intent on someone when it could just be a different perspective. And that's something I'm going to talk about later in the week. I'm trying to decide whether tomorrow I'm supposed to do a gamer's guide scheduled this week, but I don't know. You guys tell me. I'm only going to have a few hours to decide on this once this video goes live, but you guys tell me what you think. Would you rather the scheduled gamer's guide to feminism thing go up tomorrow, or would you rather I address this issue, specifically the accusation of sexism, tomorrow? Let me know, because otherwise it's going to have to wait till Thursday, because I've got to get an interview up. But let me know. And I think we'll wrap up. In closing, where I was going with this is, I get why people freak out when charges of sexism or racism or homophobia or transphobia happen, because it's a very tender subject for a lot of people, and a lot of people have been on the receiving end of those accusations, and they don't like them. It hurts. Because they feel falsely accused. And so they're very reactive when they see a developer whose product they like being accused of this stuff in a bald, sort of sweeping comment like this. So I get the emotional reaction, but I also want to remind everybody that when you react to a reaction, you are furthering that explosion. And if you do support that developer, instead of yelling at the critic, which stifles dissent and stifles criticism, and everybody claims, we don't want that, I prefer to sort of go positive and say, hold on, let's think about this for a minute. Here's all the cool things this developer does as well. Instead of getting angry and spreading around that anger and spreading around that negativity, don't fight fire with fire. Fight fire with, water, for lack of a better term, or something that's going to put out that fire, baking soda, whatever you want to quench that anger. Because when you add to the anger, when you add to the reaction, you are exponentially multiplying, because it's not just you. It's you and multiple other people all jumping on this one comment, and then it becomes this big bonfire, and people who just want to be left alone go, whoa, too hot for me, and advertisers go, whoa, too hot for me. And the assumption is that a mature rated game has mature players who can handle challenging content, and we are not proving collectively in the gaming community that this is so. I'll save it for the analysis, but everybody has a choice in how they're going to react to something. And was the Chinese Room's comment a shot? Yes. I am generally very cautious in taking a swipe at a peer. And a developer taking a swipe at another developer is that for me. Now, I do sometimes criticize people if I think they're actually doing something damaging, that is the time to do that. But I have learned through my own engagements unintentionally with the CD Projekt fan base, they're very reactive. And so at this point, we sort of know that. Maybe the Chinese room didn't, but, we all sort of know that this fan base goes boom at the slightest little spark. Now, does CD Projekt bear some responsibility for that? Yeah, of course they do. They're not saying, hey guys, we can handle a little criticism. Should they be? I don't know. If they're making money by encouraging their fan base to go out and rip people apart, well, in a capitalist system, if that's being rewarded, then who am I to say it's wrong? That's not how I'd like to do business. That's not, the ethic I would like to set for my company. But if they want an aggressive public face, if they want an aggressive fan base, that is up to them to decide. And that is up to the rest of the gaming community, whether we want to associate with that, whether that is a brand we want to put our money into. And that's the way capitalism works. And it's a lousy system, only it's better than all the others, to use the cliche. But, again, this is a system that's loud. Capitalism is loud. And so those of us who grew up in loud environments are more comfortable with it than those of us who grew up in rather safe, quiet, bubble-wrapped existences where everybody, moved along the what you're supposed to be doing path and then got out in the big bad world and finds out that the traditional education system leaves you completely unprepared for the world of work. And unfortunately, the better, the more expensive that education is, the less prepared you are in some ways. Because when you are given that privileged position, privileged by money, you don't fall flat on your face very much. And the first experience a lot of privileged kids have with failure is as an adult. And it's a freaking wake-up call. And we're seeing a lot of that on the internet. A lot of those people. What do you mean no? I mean, a lot of these outbursts are temper tantrums. They are. There are people that are going to be really ticked, but they don't watch my stuff anyway. They're off with their latte drinking San Francisco $5,000 a month 1-room apartment lifestyle. They don't listen to me. I'm a ghetto kid. And there's a reason they don't like me is I challenge the supremacy of their worldview. And it's so funny because they're the ones that think everyone should be equal as long as they think just like us. And you can only have that double think if you live in a bubble. So if you don't live in that bubble and you are confused by this, congratulations, you're thinking. That discomfort indicates that you do care about this stuff and you're willing to at least ask the question, what do I do? Now, I get that it's frustrating that there's no good answer, but you are a step ahead of a lot of people just by being open enough, by being wise enough to ask the question. So I hope that gives you a little bit of peace in this very messy debate. And now that we've found peace, we're going to close out. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in.